All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Okay, fantastic. So today we're going to be looking at excerpts from this spiritual discourse. It's called Essence of Peace, a discourse on spiritual living.
Interesting title.
Yeah, it is. It's dated March 7th, 2025. And we're going to be talking about some pretty intriguing concepts, things like cycles of time and spiritual evolution, and really a fresh perspective on achieving peace, which I think we all need.
Absolutely.
So I thought maybe we could just jump right in. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So one thing that really struck me right away is how this discourse kind of dives right into talking about the state of the world. And it describes the world as Tamo predominant. Have you ever heard that word before?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Tamil predominant.
Okay, so could you maybe give us a little bit of definition? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so Tamil predominant basically refers to a world that's dominated by negativity and suffering. So
Yeah.
darkness,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah.
And the discourse actually gives some specific examples, I think, that we can all probably relate to, like, escalating conflicts, right? And crimes that are becoming, so much more, how do I say this? Brutal, right?
Absolutely.
And even, like the crazy weather patterns, right,
Yeah.
that are causing so much damage. All these are signs, according to this discourse, that we're living in this tamo-predominant stage.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the discourse is saying that all of these things are like evidence that we're in this state of darkness.
Yeah, that seems to be the message.
Okay. So if the world is in this, state of darkness, how do we move towards something more positive? Does the discourse offer any solutions or ways to deal with this?
Well, yeah, it does. And it starts by actually challenging some conventional religious practices.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so like it suggests that endlessly performing rituals and pilgrimages in search of God is actually kind of, it's almost futile without real knowledge, without actually understanding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And there's this really provocative question in the text. It says, do people truly understand when devotion begins and ends, or are they simply following traditions blindly?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really thought-provoking question. So the discourse is basically saying there's more to devotion than just going through the motions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. True spiritual progress, according to the discourse, comes from really understanding the cycle of time and where we fit into it, where we are within that cycle.
Okay. So knowledge is key to understanding this cycle of time. This is the Gaian, I think the discourse refers to.
Absolutely. You got it. And it actually describes Gaian as a reign of knowledge,
Oh.
which I think is a really cool image. It suggests that it's out there. It's available to us. It's not some hidden secret.
I love that. That's a great way to think about it. So okay, so how does understanding this cycle of time help us deal with this, Tamo predominant world? What's the connection there?
Well, the discourse uses this really, really interesting analogy. It says to think of reality as like a grand drama.
Okay.
And each of us, all of us are actors. We're playing our roles according to this pre-written script. It even says that events like illnesses are part of this larger design.
But also everything's predestined. We have no free will.
Well, now that is a very good question, right? And the discourse does introduce this idea of a supreme being. It uses terms like Father or Shiva to kind of describe this being, this force that's kind of behind it all. And the supreme being is the one who initiates the shift from darkness to light within the cycle.
Okay.
But it doesn't explicitly say that everything is predetermined, right? It's like it leaves us with this question.
So there is a guiding force, right, behind this whole cyclical drama, but maybe we still have some freedom within that structure. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It seems like that's what the discourse is getting at, is suggesting.
Okay.
And this is where this idea of yoga comes in, right?
Okay.
But it describes yoga not so much as the physical postures that we usually think of,
Right.
It's more about this mental practice of focusing your mind and connecting with this supreme being.
Okay.
And the idea is that by connecting with this supreme being, we can, inherit those divine qualities, the good stuff.
Okay.
And ultimately, we can find liberation from suffering, from the tamo predominant.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Okay, let me see if I'm getting this. So knowledge helps us understand the cycle, right? Yoga helps us connect with this supreme being, this force, and then that connection can lead to liberation.
That's a pretty good summary.
Yeah.
It's like a step-by-step guide,
Yeah.
right? Okay. I really want to talk about this idea of transformation, this
Mhm.
shift from the darkness to the light, this tamo predominant to sato predominant,
Yeah,
transition.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
And the discourse, it talks about this transformation in detail.
Yeah.
And it makes it clear that it's not about external rituals.
Right.
It's more about purifying our thoughts and our actions and how we connect with each other.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an internal thing. It's not just about what you do on the outside.
Okay. So this transformation is more about like an internal shift towards things like love and unity.
Uh-huh.
Does the discourse say anything about how we can make that happen, how we can start to cultivate those things?
Yeah, it does. And it uses this really captivating analogy. I think you'll like this one.
Okay.
It talks about holo, which is salt water,
Okay.
and like
Yeah.
otu, which is like a sweet dessert made with milk and sugar. Okay, so salt water and a sweet dessert. How do those represent this transformation? I'm intrigued.
Well, so the salt water symbolizes, all the bitterness, all the separation, that's the Tamil predominant world, right?
Right.
And then the sweet dessert, the milk and sugar that represents that harmony and love, the unity.
Hmm.
That's the Sato predominant state, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's urging us to move from that salt water,
Okay. Yeah.
to the sweetness of the kind of
From conflict to harmony. Okay. That's a powerful image. But where do we even begin,
Yeah.
to create that kind of change? It just seems so big.
Well, according to the discourse, it begins with each of us. It
Mhm.
starts with our thoughts, our actions. It starts within our families, within
Mhm.
our communities.
Oh, okay.
It's saying that we actually have the potential, we have the power to transform this world from, something that resembles kind of hell on earth, right, into something more like heaven on earth.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
That's a pretty ambitious goal, right? Transforming the whole world. So individual, like inner change is the key to this broader transformation.
It seems so. And it really makes you wonder, if we can really achieve that kind of change, on such a huge scale, I mean, where do we even start?
Right. That is a huge question. And if this is all part of a cycle, like the discourse says, I mean, what does our current position in the cycle, what does that mean for us? But this is a lot to think about. I think we need a break. I need to process all this. What do you think?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay, so we're back, and I have to say my mind is still kind of swirling with all these ideas from this essence of peace discourse.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, isn't it?
It really is. And one thing that's really stuck with me is this whole idea of everything being part of like a larger cosmic drama.
Right.
Can we maybe talk a little bit more about that? Like what does that actually mean for us? How does that play out in our lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think what's so interesting about this analogy is it really challenges our usual way of thinking about spiritual growth. We often think of it as like a straight path, right? You start here, you go there. But this whole idea of time being cyclical,
Yeah.
it suggests that it's more like a spiral. There are these periods of darkness and light that are constantly kind of weaving together.
So we're not just on this like linear journey toward enlightenment. It's more of a spiral path.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're in this tamo predominant phase right now, like we were talking about earlier, does that mean like a Saito predominant phase is like bound to happen? Does it have to?
Well, that's a really key question, right? And it seems like the discourse is suggesting that yeah, it will. If you remember, it describes the supreme being as the one who it initiates that shift, right, from darkness to light.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe that means that transformation is kind of inherently woven into the fabric of existence itself.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Okay. So even with all of the like conflict and suffering we see in the world right now, we can like trust that a brighter era is coming.
It's possible. And that's, I think a really powerful takeaway for people. But the discourse doesn't, paint it as just sitting around and waiting passively,
Right.
We talked about Gain and yoga, right?
Right. Yeah.
Those are tools that allow us to actively participate in that transformation. Not just individually, but collectively.
Right. So we're not just bystanders in this whole cosmic shift. We
Yeah.
actually we have a role to play. We have agency. Okay. I'm curious though about this idea that everything has its place in the cycle. Even suffering. How can that be?
That's a really it's a concept that makes you really stop and think, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think the discourse is explicitly claiming that everything is predetermined, but it's presenting this worldview where even suffering has a role within the larger cycle. I like to imagine it almost like a dance, each soul performing its part in this intricate cosmic choreography. Even if we don't always understand the steps, we might not get it.
So even the difficult parts of life, the things that we would normally label as bad, they're all part of this cosmic dance.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is. It really is. So how do we reconcile these ideas, like, the inevitability of a pseudo-predominant era coming,
Right.
but also the importance of individual action, right?
Yeah.
If it's destined to happen anyway, why put in the effort,
That's such a perceptive observation.
Yeah.
And I think it really highlights the crucial role of yoga in all of this.
Mhm.
It's not about passively waiting for the cycle to shift.
Right.
It's about actively aligning ourselves with that shift. Our thoughts, our actions, our connection to the Supreme Being, they all play a part.
So even if we don't have control over the script, we can choose how we play our part, like actors,
Yeah.
adding nuance to their characters, even within a predetermined plot.
That's a brilliant analogy. I love that.
Mm.
And I think what makes this discourse so fascinating is that it doesn't lay out a rigid set of beliefs, right? It's not like, here's what you have to believe.
Right.
It offers a framework for understanding, a way of seeing the world that encourages us to engage with it, to question it, and ultimately to find our own unique place within it.
It's like we're on this cosmic treasure hunt,
Yeah.
We're searching for clues to understand our place in this whole grand scheme. And speaking of which, you mentioned in the last part this idea of the world transforming into heaven on earth. What does that actually look like? Is that even achievable?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think one of the most compelling things about this discourse is that it doesn't offer a fixed definition of what that would be, what would heaven on earth look like. It's more like an invitation to us to envision it, to consider what a world transformed by love and harmony and wisdom, what would that actually look like?
So we're not just passively waiting for this transformation, we're actively shaping the vision of it.
I think so. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a powerful idea to consider.
That is powerful. Okay, this is making me think about this idea of again, this transformative knowledge,
Yeah.
And the discourse talks about how abundant and accessible it is, which is great.
Right.
But how do we actually access this rain of knowledge?
Mhm.
How do we know we're tapping into the real deal, the authentic wisdom, and not just someone's interpretation?
Right. And there is so much information out there.
Right.
Right. It's like, how do we even know where to start?
It's overwhelming.
It is. And I think the discourse seems to place a lot of emphasis on the teacher-student relationship,
Okay.
really highlighting the role of guidance and mentorship in this pursuit of knowledge.
Right.
If you think about it, the Supreme Being is often described as this father,
Right.
right, who guides and teaches.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like it's suggesting that there's this lineage of wisdom that's being passed down, a tradition,
Mm-hmm.
that helps us to understand and apply these complex ideas.
So it's not enough to just read the discourse on our own. We need to seek guidance from people who have experience with these teachings, people who've kind of already walked the path.
Yeah, precisely. And this is where the concept of satsang comes in, right? This idea of being in the company of truth,
Mm-hmm.
surrounding ourselves with like-minded seekers who are also on this path. The discourse really suggests that this shared journey, this connection with others who are seeking to grow, it can actually really enhance our understanding and really accelerate our progress.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a support system, a community to share the journey with and to learn from and to lean on when things get tough. It's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
Exactly. And, this brings us to another interesting point. The discourse talks about this Tamil-predominant world, right?
Yeah.
All the darkness and negativity that we see.
Right.
But it also acknowledges that within that same world, there are individuals who embody the qualities of that Sato-predominant state.
Okay.
The light and purity, that we're all
Yeah.
striving for. It's like they're living examples of what's possible.
So even in the midst of all this darkness, there are these beacons of light that are kind of showing us the way.
Yeah, I think that's a really encouraging thought,
It
right?
is. It is. But how do we learn from these individuals? Like what's the best way to approach that?
Well, the discourse actually cautions against blind imitation. You know,
Right.
it's not about copying their actions. It's about observing their qualities. It's about understanding the principles that are guiding them,
Hmm.
and then trying to integrate those principles into our own lives.
So it's about like studying the masters, learning from their example, but ultimately like finding our own way of expressing those principles.
Exactly. It's about taking their wisdom and making it our own, adapting it to our own unique circumstances, and letting it guide our actions. It's like having a spiritual mentor,
Hmm.
someone who can challenge us to grow, help us see our blind spots, and kind of illuminate the path ahead.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Especially in a world that can feel so overwhelming at times, you know. It's good to know that we have these resources, that there are people that we can turn to for guidance and support.
Absolutely. And speaking of guidance, this makes me think about another point from the discourse. Remember that whole analogy of the drama unfolding?
Yeah, yeah.
It raises a question about fate and free will.
Yes. I've been thinking about that too. Like if everything's kind of already determined, then what does it mean for the choices that we make? Do they even matter?
That's the big question, right?
Right.
And the discourse doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but I think it offers some really interesting perspectives. Remember how it describes each of us as playing a role in this cosmic drama?
Hmm.
It doesn't specify how we choose to play those roles.
So we're like given the outline of the character,
Hmm.
but we have the freedom to interpret it, to express it in our own way.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The script might provide the framework, the
Yeah.
basic plot points,
Hmm.
but it leaves room for improvisation,
Okay.
for individual expression.
So we can't change the overall story, but we can choose how we respond to the events, how we interact with the other characters.
Yeah.
Okay. We can choose how we play our part.
Exactly. And this is where the discourse's emphasis on yoga becomes so important. It's not about being passive observers, right? It's
Yeah.
about actively engaging with the creative process.
Yeah.
It's about using our understanding of the cycle, our connection to the supreme being
Mhm.
to navigate the challenges and the opportunities that come our way.
It's like we're not just actors in this drama, but we're also co-creators in a way.
Yeah.
We're working together to shape this unfolding narrative.
I love that. And that actually brings up another really crucial point from the discourse, this whole idea of transforming our relationships from that state of conflict, that we talked about, the latela, to a state of harmony, the lode. This concept has such profound implications for how we interact with each other. It's not just some abstract idea.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really intrigued by this whole concept, but I'm wondering like how do we actually achieve that level of harmony in our relationships, especially when they're strained or, filled with conflict?
That's a huge question. And I think the discourse's emphasis on yoga
Hmm.
again really holds the key here.
Okay.
It's not just about the physical postures, but it's about cultivating that inner peace and connecting with the supreme being,
Hmm.
right? And it's through that connection that we can really begin to embody those divine qualities of love, compassion, and understanding.
So it's an inside out approach, right? By cultivating that inner peace, we naturally create more harmony in our relationships.
Exactly. It's not about trying to change other people. It's about transforming ourselves.
Mhm.
And the discourse reminds us that we're all works in progress,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And true love includes forgiveness, supporting each other's growth, and creating space for healing.
So creating this culture of compassion within our relationships, I mean, that sounds like such a powerful way to begin this whole transformation from Latudo to a Theta Uruquist. But where do we go from here?
Well, that brings us to, I think, a really crucial part of the discourse, which we can delve into in part 3. It's about those specific steps we can take,
Okay.
both individually and collectively,
Yeah.
to move from this Tao predominant state towards that Sato predominant world. And thinking about forgiveness and its role in all of this,
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready to dive into those practical applications. I think that's what we all need. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this essence of peace discourse. And in the last couple of parts, we've been talking about, the tamo-predominant state of the world, this whole idea of the cyclical nature of time and the potential for transformation. And now I'm really curious to actually explore some of those practical steps that we can take to move towards a sato-predominant reality, like a world that embodies more of those qualities of light and harmony and unity.
Yeah, it's interesting how this discourse doesn't just present these concepts in this like theoretical way. It actually gives some tangible examples and suggests practical applications for these teachings in our everyday lives.
That's what I love about it. It's not just about abstract philosophy, it's about, real world transformation. So where does it suggest we begin?
Well, one of the most striking examples is the discourse's emphasis on transforming our family relationships. Like it actually challenges us to envision heaven on earth, starting within our own homes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So the idea is that if we can create more harmonious relationships within our families, that can ripple outwards and impact the wider world.
that's exactly it. And it starts by shifting our perspective on those relationships.
Hmm.
The discourse encourages us to see our family members, even the challenging ones, as souls on their own journeys, playing their roles in this cosmic drama that we've been talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
So rather than getting caught up in those, everyday conflicts and dramas, we can try to see them with more compassion and understanding.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Our actions have an impact on each other, and by responding with love and understanding, even when it's difficult, we're contributing to creating a more peaceful environment for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's about creating a culture of empathy within our families where we see each other's struggles and support each other's growth.
And it's not about condoning negative behavior or pretending that everything's perfect.
Right.
The discourse acknowledges that we all make mistakes. It's about understanding that true love includes forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness seems to be a really key element in this whole transformation. It's about
Right.
letting go of resentment and choosing to see the best in each other.
And in ourselves. Forgiveness, it starts with, recognizing our own imperfections, accepting ourselves as we are, and extending that same compassion to others.
Right, so it's a two-way street. We can't truly forgive others if we haven't learned to forgive ourselves, right? But how do we actually apply these principles in those difficult moments, when conflicts inevitably arise?
That's a great question.
Hmm.
And the discourse, it points us back to the practice of yoga,
Okay.
not just the physical postures, but the mental discipline, of focusing the mind, cultivating inner peace, and connecting with the supreme being.
So we can use yoga as a tool to navigate those challenging interactions.
Yeah.
It's like an anchor that helps us kind of stay grounded in those moments of conflict.
That's a really good way to think about it. Yeah, by cultivating that inner peace,
Yeah.
we're less likely to react impulsively or get swept away by those negative emotions.
Hmm.
We can respond with more clarity and compassion.
This idea of responding rather than reacting is really resonating with me right now.
Yeah.
It's about taking a pause before we engage so we can choose our words and actions more consciously.
Yeah, that pause, that moment of reflection can make all the difference.
Yeah.
It allows us to tap into
Yeah.
that inner wisdom
Hmm.
and respond in a way that aligns with our values and our intentions.
Yeah, it's about moving from that saltwater state of reactivity to a more peaceful and considered approach. That sweetness of
Yeah.
Klon that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. And it's not always easy. The discourse acknowledges that we're living in this tamo predominant era, a
Yeah.
time when darkness and negativity can feel really overwhelming. But it also reminds us that this darkness is not the end of the story.
Right.
It's a phase in a larger cycle. And just like a seed contains the potential for a magnificent tree, so too does this era contain the seeds of a Sato predominant world.
Wow, that's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of darkness, there's always hope. There's always the potential for growth and transformation.
Yeah, and we're not just passive observers in this process.
Hmm.
The discourse emphasizes that we have a role to play, that our individual choices and actions actually contribute to that collective shift.
So we're not just waiting for this transformation to happen, we're actively participating in creating it.
That's right. And one of the most inspiring aspects of this discourse, I think, is that it emphasizes the power of individual transformation to impact the wider world.
Yeah.
You know, it suggests that as we purify our own thoughts and actions, as we cultivate more love and compassion in our relationships, we contribute to a ripple effect that spreads outwards, you know, touching the lives of those around us.
It's like those concentric circles that form when you drop a pebble in a pond.
Yeah.
Our actions create ripples that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's such a beautiful image. And it reminds us that even small acts of kindness, small choices made with love and intention, can have a profound impact. You know, we might not see the full extent of those ripples, but we can trust that they're making a difference.
Yeah, it's empowering to think that we're not powerless in the face of all these global challenges, you know. We can choose to be part of the solution, starting with our own thoughts and actions and relationships.
And that brings me to the final thought I want to leave you with. You know, this discourse emphasizes the importance of knowledge, Guyan, as a key to liberation, you know. But knowledge is not just about accumulating information. It's about applying that information, integrating it into our lives, and allowing it to transform us from the inside out.
So it's not just about knowing the concepts, it's about living them, embodying them in our daily lives.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens. You know, as we start to live these principles, as we make those small choices with love and awareness, we begin to experience the transformative power of this discourse firsthand. We start to see the world through a new lens, a lens of hope and compassion and possibility.
This deep dive has been such an enlightening experience. It's given me so much to think about and a renewed sense of hope for the future.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, this discourse, it's just the beginning of the journey, you know. It's an invitation to explore, to question, to keep diving deeper into these profound concepts and to discover for yourself that transformative power of this essence of peace. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
And to all our listeners out there, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We'll see you on our next adventure.